Good Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Yevamos Daf Kuf Hey, and we're going to start on Kuf Daled on the base, 15 lines from the bottom. So the Gemara tells us the following incident. Shalchulei La'avod Shmuel. They sent the following halacha to the father of Shmuel, and they told him, Yevama Sharakaka Tachotz. Hold on one second. So it says a Yevama that spits on the ground should do the chalitza, meaning to say that even though she spits on the ground, mikal the ifsalala me'achim. So this Yevama who spits on the ground is going to be disqualified from the brothers. Meaning just spitting on the ground itself is enough to tell for her to no longer be able to do chalitza with the Yevam's brothers. So, Mani, who's this position that says that just spitting on the ground is enough to disqualify her from doing chalitza with the brothers? Rabbi Akiva, if you want to say that this is the position of Rabbi Akiva, if you want to say this position of Akiva, who says that if she just did chalitza and she didn't spit on the ground, it's still acceptable. And maybe he's going to say that also if she just spit without removing the shoe, she's going to be prohibited to do even with any of the brothers. We can't say that. Why? Ma b'makom mitzvah. Just like if it's in a circumstance where it's actually a mitzvah to do something, the iko meimar midi dahave a'imurim, like we have with the principle of the imurim, with the parts on the altar, where we say that if they're there, if they're current and present, it's not going to be if they're not there, it's not a requirement, but if they're there, it's a requirement, even though they're a mitzvah. And Amar Rabbi Akiva lo ma'akva, and Rabbi Akiva says, in that circumstance, even it's a mitzvah, it's not required. If when it's not there, it's not required. Me'achan ifsla, would you say in this case that she spits on the ground, which is not a requirement of the chalitza ceremony, it'd be enough to disqualify her to the brothers? It must be it's going according to the position of El Rabbi Elazar. You say it's going according to the position of Rabbi Elazar, who says in our Mishnah that spitting on the ground is a requirement for the chalitza ceremony. So we see from here that he holds that spitting is an action, but it can't be Rabbi Elazar. But we have a principle that there are two things that are, whenever there are two things that are required, and in this case it's chalitza and rakika, the removal of the shoe and the spitting on the ground. And we have a principle whenever there's two things that are required, that one is not good without the other. So it must be Karebi, El Karebi, the Tanya that Rebbe taught. Kivsei atzeres eimekachin alechem el b'shlita. And if you have the sheep of Shavuos, that when you slaughter the sheep, it sanctifies the bread and allows you to eat the shtei alechem. That is only going to be able to be sanctified with the slaughter. And we learned in the Braisa, that if you slaughter the animal with the right intent and you sprinkle the blood with the right intent, then the blood is sanctified. Or lo kidesh, if you only slaughter with the right intent but did not sprinkle the blood with the right intent, but you slaughter without the wrong, but you slaughter properly, but you did not sprinkle the blood properly, or the inverse, shachat shalosh shman, v'zarak lishman, or you slaughtered without the right intent and you sprinkle the blood with the right intent, o kiddush alechem, you have not sanctified the bread. Shach dam shman v'zarak damat shalosh shman, but if you slaughtered it and you did not sprinkle it properly, kadosh ve'eno kadosh. Tivei Rebbe says it's kadosh in one sense, but it's not kadosh in the other sense. And what does that mean? That means that it's holy, but you're not allowed to eat it. So under those circumstances, that was the position of Rebbe, but Rebbe Lezer Shimon says, "Well, olam eino kadosh ad sheyishlo lishman v'yizrok dam al lishman." You need to do both. So in this case, also here, it shouldn't be sufficient unless you spit with the removal of the shoe. So therefore, whose position is this that we require? So the position that just spitting is enough to say that she's disqualified from the other brothers, it must be the position of Rebbe, who says by the case of the 2 loaves of bread on Shavuos, that if you just do one of the actions, it's enough to make the bread holy, even though you can't eat it. So to here, it's enough to make the Yevamos disqualified from the other brothers. The Gemara says, but wait, let's go back to Rabbi Akiva's position. Remember, Rabbi Akiva said you don't require the spitting, it's not essential, and so therefore it's not going to be enough to disqualify her. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva, Rakiko Apostle. Does Rabbi Akiva really say that spitting on the ground by itself is not sufficient to disqualify her from marrying the other brothers? But Tanya, then we learn the Brisa, Cholza, Velo Rakaka. Let's say she spat on the ground. Let's say she removed the shoe, but she did not spit on the ground. We're on the top of 105a. Then under those circumstances, Cholza velo rakaka velo kara. Let's say she just removed the shoe, but she didn't spit or read from the verses. Chalitzasa kashera. It's still okay. Just needs to remove the shoe. Rakaka velo cholza velo kara. Let's say she spat, but she did not remove the shoe or read. Chalitzasa psula. Then it's enough to say it's a chalitzasa psula, and she's not allowed to be with the other brothers, even though it's not enough for her to marry somebody else. But karav or rakaka cholza. Let's say she read, but she didn't spit or remove the shoe. Ein kam beis nichush. Now there's nothing to be concerned about at all. So who is this opinion? If you want to say, Rabbi Eliezer wouldn't say that if you remove the shoe without spitting or reading that it's a kosher chalitza. You have to do, you certainly have to do the chalitza and the rakika. You have to do the removal of the shoe and the spitting. So it must be Pshita Rabbi Akiva. It must be Rabbi Akiva's position. And Rabbi Akiva says here that if you just did the chalitza, if you just did the spitting, but you did not remove the shoe and you did not read from it, it's disqualified. And and who is she disqualified? Laman. If you want to say she's disqualified to the world, meaning say that she can't marry anybody else. Obviously, she wouldn't be able to do that because she didn't have chalitza. So it must be the Istra. Why would you think that's allowed? She didn't have chalitza to say she's allowed to marry other people. So it must be it must be that she's disqualified to the other brothers. And Shema Mina. And so we see from here that Rabbi Akiva's other position. Rabbi Akiva could be consistent with the idea that we start off by sending this message to the father of Shmuel, that if she just does the spitting, even though it's not enough, to allow her to everybody else, it's still enough to disqualify her to the other brothers. So the Gemara says, well, Rabbi Akiva, Maishna Rakiko, Maishna Kriya. According to Rabbi Akiva, why is it enough for her to disqualify to the brothers by just doing the spitting, but not if she just reads the verses? Well, the Gemara says that the difference is the Kriya, the reading of the verses, Bein b'tchila, bein b'sof, well, milchof leilei. Since you read the verses at the beginning of the chalitza ceremony and the end of the chalitza ceremony, then people are not going to come make a mistake and say that after chalitza. Well, let me read the Rashi. Kriya bein kodem chalitza, because you have the reading prior to the chalitza. She says me'en yevami, and also after the chalitza kacha yaseh. Now, so you do the reading both at the beginning of the ceremony and the end of the ceremony. Now, inami amridan tisyabim. If we would say that afterwards she could do yibum after she does one of the readings, well, milchafei inche b'chalutza. then people are not going to confuse her with a woman who had chalitza and also a chalitza to do yibum. Because you won't say, oh, after she did the chalitza, she went out and did the yibum, because we'd say, oh, she read it prior to the chalitza, but the spitting comes after the removal of the shoe. So people might think, oh, even after you do chalitza, you could go back and do yibum. And so therefore, that's why Rabbi Akiva says, once you do the spitting, you're not going to allow her to do, she's going to be disqualified to the other brothers, because you might allow a chalitza after a yibum after chalitza. So that's what Rabbi Akiva says. We'll just read it again in the Gemara. Ma'ashna kriya deisa b'em chil b'em sofom nechafalei rakika d'chil leisa b'sof isa nechafalei ma'aslo mishra chalutza la'achim. So you might end up allowing somebody who's prohibited because she did a chalitza back to her brother. Mika de Amri, alternative version of what they sent. This is what the people from Eretz Yisrael sent to the father of Shmuel. Chalutza la'achin. Yevama sharakika techlotz ve'ina tzricha l'aruk pamacharetz. That this is what they sent to the father of Shmuel. A Yevama who spit on the ground. Tachot, she has to still do chalitza, but she doesn't need to spit another time. Like this woman who came in front of Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Abba Bar Mamo Kamei. Rabbi Abba Bar Mamo was sitting in front of Rabbi Ami. She spat before she did the chalitza. So Amalei Rabbi Ami. So Rabbi Ami said to her, Chalotzla v'sharila tigra. Let her remove the shoe. She doesn't need to spit again. You remove the shoe, and now she's able to go out to the marketplace. So Amalei Rabbi Abba ina merak. But don't we require her to spit? They said, yeah, she did spit. Harakikala. She spat before she removed the shoe, even though you're supposed to spit afterwards. She did it before. Where it says Vitira kumabakach, so let her spit a second time. Let her move the shoe and spit a second time. What's the big deal? Where it says Nafik mine chorba, a terrible thing will come out of it. Why? Ti amris the other v'terak. As if you're going to allow her to, if you're going to say go spit a second time, then what will people say? They'll say Rakika kamaisa leis b'mashasha. They'll say, oh, the first spitting and nothing to it. And they'll say, oh, the people say the first spitting doesn't count at all, and after she spits, which we had said is enough to really disqualify her, people are going to come around and allow her to marry the other brothers after she spit, because they'll say she didn't really do chalitza with the first brothers. Mar says, but how can you allow the spitting beforehand? Don't we require to remove all the shoe and then the spitting? That means, don't you require to do it in the proper order? This kisidron is the same phrase we find by, like, when you write mezuzah and tefillin, has to be written every word in order, every letter in order. So the Gemara says kisidron lo ma'akva. So he says no, the order of the ceremony by the chalitza is not required. Who savar Rabbi Abba Bar Mamo was at first initially thought dechuya kamedachwa. He just thought Rabbi Ami was coming up with an answer, but didn't have like a proof text for it. Nafak dakva ashkach Tanya bein sheiktim chalitza rakika bein sheiktim rakika chalitza mashasa. So he found the price that says the order of it doesn't matter. Whichever way you do it, it is sufficient. Levi nafak l'kiryasa. Levi went out to a town. The commentaries explain he was trying out for a job as the shtatrav. He was trying to be the rabbi of the city. Balmina, they asked him a few questions. They said, Gidemes Malsha Techotz. He said, a woman who's amputated, can she do the chalitza? She remove the shoe with her teeth. Yevama Sharakika Dam. Second question. The blood, if she spits not saliva but blood, what's the law? And then they said, maybe if these are too difficult, let's give him a question in homilies. They said, it says in the angel said to Daniel, I'll tell you what was signed with the seal of truth, what was written with the ktav hames, the seal of truth in heaven. You mean to say, they asked them, there's something in heaven that's not the seal of truth? So Levi didn't know the answers. 0 for 3. Asa Shal Ben Midrash, he came to the base medrash, Amalei Miksiv Becholza Biyad. Does it say? So they told him, it doesn't say she needs to do the chalitza with her hand. She could do it with her teeth. Miksiv yarka rok. Does it say that she needs to spit saliva? It says she has to spit. Is there something that's signed in heaven that's not true? Well, kasha, it's also not a problem. When God makes an oath, some of them a decree, some of them have an oath, some don't have an oath. If it has an oath, it won't be overturned. But if it doesn't have an oath, it could be reversed. You understand? If the decree has an oath with it, it's never torn up. As it says, therefore he says, I took an oath to the house of Eli that Eli's house will never have an atonement, meaning they'll always die young. And they're not going to achieve atonement with sacrifices and offerings forever. They sinned with sacrifices. Eli's children sinned with sacrifices, so therefore they're not going to be able to even achieve atonement with the sacrifices. So they're not going. They're not going to achieve an atonement with sacrifices and offerings. So, but they'll achieve atonement through words of Torah. And Abai says, but they'll achieve atonement with acts of kindness. But the Gemara's Tosfos says, Rabba Gars. This is Rabba, not Rava. Usually it's Abai and Rava interacting. But Rava was not a Kohen, and Eli was a Kohen. So how could Rava have been a descendant of Kohen? So he says it has to be Rabba. So the Gemara says, so Abai says, Rabba had said that he achieves atonement through Torah study, and Rava says he could achieve atonement through, and Abai says he could achieve atonement through acts of kindness. Abai and Rabba to base Eli Ka. So Abai and Rabba and Abai both came from this house of Eli. Rabba the Asak Torah, Rabba, who was engaged in Torah study, he lived 40 years, which is an extra 22 years than the house of Eli typically lived. And Abai the Asak Torah, B'Gmilas Chasadim, Abai engaged in Torah and acts of kindness. Chayashit in Shannon. He lived 60 years. So the best is Torah with acts of kindness. There was one family in Jerusalem that they used to die at 18 years old. He told Rabbi Yochanan Zaki, he said, maybe you come from the family of Eli, as it states, that they're going to die young. So go study Torah and you'll live. So they went engaged in Torah study and they lived. They called them the family of Yochanan. But my question is, why didn't he tell them to do Gemilas Chasadim? They would have lived longer. Anyway, Amar Shmuel Bar Onya, Amar Minayel Exardin Shal Tzibur Sheino Nechtam. How do we know when God makes a decree in the community? It's never signed. Eino Nechtam, it's not signed. It says in Jeremiah, that if you're stained with the sin, you think you can wash it away? How do we know even if it's signed, it can be torn up? As it states, Mika Hashem Aleinu B'Kol Kareinu Olav. That whenever you call out to God, God will listen. So you could tear up the decree. Where it says, seek out God when he can be found, meaning not at all times. Only in certain times can you call out to God. So where it says, one's by an individual, one's by a community. Yachad Amos, when can you cry out as an individual and you'll be successful? 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So they sent a message to the father of Shmuel, Yevamos Sharakik Adam Tichotz. So a Yevama who spits blood, they said that is considered chalitza. Because there's no such thing as blood that doesn't have a little saliva in it. They challenge the question. But then we see that you might have thought that the blood that comes out of the of your mouth or from the pee of the amma from the mouth of the member is tamei. Tam omer zavo tamei. Bein tamei yotzimi piv and pi amma tamei. There it seems that there's no saliva, there's just blood. Because the saliva was zav is tamei, and there it's tahor. So the Gemara says, "Lo kasha kam b'motzis kam b'shosis." If you suck it like this and then spit it out, then you're going to say that has saliva in it. But if it just spills out of your mouth, it has no saliva, that blood, and therefore that's not spitting. When I was studying this last night with her son Shia, he said to me, but he's reading a book, and the book says that you can always cry out. An individual can always cry out for prayers. So here we say that the individual's prayers are only heard between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So I didn't answer him at the time, but now I was thinking about it now as I was learning the Gemara. It says here that the community's prayers are always answered. You can always cry out. So the answer to that question is, if the individual makes himself like the community, if he gets involved in the tzarchei tzibur, the needs of the community, then he's no longer an individual, then he's a community, and then his prayers will always be answered. So the Gemara says, if it was a deaf mute who did the chalitza, we said that such a chalitza is not going to be valid. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. But even though it's not valid, the Rabbi Meir said that you make the chalitza of a minor could get begadol, meaning to say that. So it says Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, that which we learned in the Mishnah, that a minor who does chalitza also is disqualified, but still the Yevama cannot do even with the other brothers, and it doesn't mean it's nothing. That's the position of Rabbi Meir, who says that they made the chalitza of a 9-year-old like a get to disqualify by an adult. Meaning to say the rabbis made a decree on a minor that his chalitza is enough to disqualify the other brothers for her from doing yibum with the other brothers. But the sages say the chalitza of a minor is nothing, and she's not disqualified to do with the other brothers. But let's say it's a ketana shachal. So it said in our Mishnah, if it was a minor that did chalitza, then when she gets older, she has to do chalitza again. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav Zudivrei Rabbi Meir. That's the position of Rabbi Meir. He says that the boy is just like the girl. It says Ish Kasuv the parasha. It says in the verse. It says Ish Lakachas Asivamto. It says a man Makshin an Isha. And we compare the man to the woman, that just like with respect to Yavam, only when he's an adult can he do the chalitza. So too with respect to Yavama, only when she's an adult is she able to do the chalitza. So the Gemara says, Isha ben Gedolah ben Ketana. So it says in the Torah, the Chacham said the opposite. It says an Ish, which means only a man is he limited to being an adult, but the woman can do chalitza whether she's an adult or a minor. Man Chacham, more of these Chachamim will say that a woman could do chalitza even as a minor. That's Rabbi Yossi, the Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Shimba, Rabbi. One time, Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Shimba, Rabbi Havayasu, Pat Havayasu. They were sitting there. Patachamiнаyo, and one of them opened up and said, "Hamaspal tzarach shitin inav hamata." When you daven, you need to put your eyes down to the ground, as it says, "V'hayu einai v'libi." Sham kol yamim. It says, my eyes and my heart were there all the days. Meaning to say that they need to be facing down, because that's where the shlina is. Vayu einai will be sham. The shlina is on the ground. It says, no, you put your eyes above, as it says, Nasalav Avenu al kapayim. We lift up our hearts towards our hands when we lift up our eyes. So therefore, one says put your eyes to the ground when you pray, the other one says put your eyes to the heaven. In the meantime, Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi came to them. He says, what are you talking about? So we're talking about prayer. So he says, this is what my father said. I'm a spalel. This is what Rabbi Yossi says. He says that one who prays needs to put his eyes below, and his heart above. To fulfill both verses. In the meantime, also Rabbi Lemisifta. Meantime, Rabbi showed up to give this year. Inu havu kalili, those who were quick to move, yasivu b'duchtav, they quickly sat down. They used to sit on the floor. But Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi Agav Yukrei, he was a heavy guy. He wasn't nimble. So he was walking, and so it was a little disrespectful to the other people because he was walking while they were all sitting. So he was walking above them. So there was a man there named Abdan. He says, "Who's this guy who's walking over the heads of the people, of the holy people?" He says, "I'm Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yossi. I've come to study Torah." So he says, "Do you think you're worthy enough to study Torah from Rebbe? Rebbe's such a great teacher. Who are you?" He says, "Moshe. Do you think Moshe was who was Moshe to learn Torah from God?" So he says, "Yeah, but you're not Moshe." He says, "Yeah." He says, "Yeah, but you think your teacher is God?" So Rebbe there basically got his punishment because Rabbi saw Rishmal Bar Rabbi Yossi being harassed, and he didn't defend him, and so therefore he got his punishment to come away Rabbi, that he was called your teacher but not my teacher. Anyway, meantime, a woman showed up in front of Rabbi to get chalitza. Go check her to see if she's an adult. Meaning to say, you can only do chalitza if she's an adult, and that's why the story is coming in. But after Abdan left, Amar, so Basar did Nafak, Amar Rabbi Shmuel, Kachamar Abba, Ishkos of the Parsha, Isha Ben Gdal Ben Gdana. And Abdan says, well, my father, Rabbi Yossi, said, and this is why this whole source is cited. The father said you could do the chalitza whether she's an adult or whether she's a minor. So the Gemara says, well, in that case, so Rabbi said to Abban, come back. We already have a teaching for Rabbi Yossi that we don't need to check her. She can do chalitza even as a minor. Kamafasa Avdan va'asi. So Avdan was walking over the people and coming. So Amar Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, sorry, you can't walk over the people. Misha tzarcho am kadosh yipasa rashi am kadosh. Misha ain't tzarcho am kadosh echi pasa rashi am kadosh. He said, I was needed. I gave an answer. I helped the people, but you didn't give an answer. You can't walk over the people. Amar Rabbi Avdan kum beduchtech. And Rabbi said to Avdan, yeah, you stay in your place. So you stay in your place. That's what they basically said to Abdan. You stay in your place. Tana, we went in the Brisa, but also Shah, at that moment, Mitztara Abdan became afflicted. He became punished. And Vitavu Shnei Banav, and his two sons drowned, because why was Abdan punished? Because he was harassing Rabbi Shmuel Bar Rabbi Yossi. And so therefore Abdan became punished. He became punished. So therefore, for that reason, his two sons died. Umanu Shtei Kolosef, and his two daughter-in-laws rejected the marriage with people who were married to his sons, his other sons. Amar Nachmar Yitzchak, Baruch Rachmana de Kasbela Avdan B'Hai Amos. Nachmar Yitzchak says, praise God that he punished Avdan in this world, because now in the world to come he's not going to be punished. And Amar Rabbi Yami Midvar Shal Rabbi Nomod, and from these words of Rabbi we learn Katana Choletzes B'Peutos, that the minor girl can do chalitza even when she's peutos, even when she's in this age of going through puberty, the stage that's younger, meaning say even as young as 6, the commentaries say. Rabbi says, nas nidarim, until she's able to make a vow, which Rashi says is 1 year prior to her going through puberty, like we learned in Mesachas Nida. And if it's 11 years old and 1 day, her vows are checked if she knows to whom she is vowing, and then they're valid. And the law is actually that we don't do chalitza until she has 2 hairs, and then we're going to allow her to do the chalitza. Okay, we'll stop here. God willing, we'll repeat this, but I just want to say before everybody disappears, hold on. I want to say